Rachel, it's all you. Come on in.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Eric and Derek and Mary Margaret, and for having this meeting. I remember now, you guys were a lot of fun. Okay, yeah. So, howdy, my name's Rachel. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is March 22nd, 2017. I have a sponsor. I sponsor others. I have a home group. It's actually not St. Pete Group anymore. I forgot to update that because we moved to North Carolina, but I was just there last month to give a sponsee a chip. So, we left on good terms. Uh, and let's see. So, yes, I have a couple of home groups now in Charlotte, North Carolina. I have a service commitment at those home groups, and I address my alcoholism on a daily basis. I did not realize that this was a 45-minute share. So I was thinking, I'm not going to do the story that I usually do, which is the truth. But maybe I'll be able to focus more on the steps. But 45 minutes, that's all my material. That's all I got. So here we go. I'm from St. Pete, Florida. Um, and so that's I say that just to say that, I didn't have to go anywhere or change anything about my surroundings in order to get sober. Um, that's where it all happened. That's where it all went down, all the dirty deeds and all the good recovery. I don't talk too much about my upbringing, not because I don't think you guys could relate, but because I don't find it relevant to my alcoholism. And for what it's worth, I did grow up with an alcoholic. It does run in the family, as science tries to determine what biological features there are to alcoholism. But I just, especially the longer I stay on this side of adulthood, um, we all have our stuff, whether you're in AA or outside of AA. I've met people with far worse childhoods than mine who don't drink themselves to death, and so it's not that it's not a part of my story. It's just not the thing that made me an alcoholic. And so there were good times, there were bad times. What I've noticed in hindsight was that I like what the big book says about being an alcoholic. You can find out if you're an alcoholic if when you honestly want to quit drinking, you can't, or if when you drink, you can't control the amount you take, then you're probably alcoholic. That's good. That's simple. I remember my second meeting ever. People were talking about the fourth step and how alcoholics are selfish and self-centered. And I remember sitting there thinking, "What do you mean? I just got here. Why are you being so mean to me?" Um, so I needed a simple definition of what it meant to be an alcoholic. So that one works. But um, there are certain other things that I think we have in common as alcoholics. Um, and anyway, I'm kind of losing it. Let me just put it like this. As I was growing up, there were certain things that you might be able to look at and point and be like, "Oh, okay, this person was trying to control the way that they felt, and they were trying to control the things around them in order to be okay," that I never really grew out of. So like my first means of coping was to be a perfectionist, and I was like really good at school, and that was who I was. I was the nerd. I was top of the class type deal, and I did that until I just couldn't do it anymore. And something happened, and that method of dealing with life, organizing life, getting my self-esteem, it didn't work anymore. And so then I became an adrenaline junkie, and I put myself in a lot of dangerous situations, just to feel alive, man. And I did that until I couldn't do it anymore, and the state of Florida tried to take my license for truancy, and I went from like way up here as a student to like way down here, and like you've missed a third of your junior year. Where are you? So I did that until I just couldn't do it anymore, and then I found my next coping mechanism, and this one worked for a really long time. When I say coping mechanism, I mean something that organized my life. Okay, this was the next thing that organized my life. I found a man, found a man. And I mean, I found a man. I was 17 and I found a man. So there you go. And that worked for a while. I focused my life around this man, and I was able to keep going for. Oh, I'm putting my hand up. Oh, that's funny. Of course, it works now. It doesn't work when I want it to work. Anyway, so I found this man and I'm going forward and I graduate high school and I get in, I'm starting to do the whole college thing and I'm moving forward and seemingly things are not as feisty as they were, but here comes my drinking. And it was subtle. I served throughout college And I just remember it started off as like shift drinks at the end of shifts, right? And of course, I drank in high school when I was going crazy, but it was just these binges that would happen and we would go crazy and it wasn't that big a deal. Everyone was doing it. And then so then I'm in college and I'm having shift drinks every night because that's what everyone in the service industry does. And then I'm drinking a little bit before my shift, just to be cool. And then I'm going to class and I've had a few drinks and then um I'm actually not going to class, but I'm at the bar that's at the tavern that's at USF, and my chemistry professor is walking past me to go to the class that I'm not attending. Um, and I'm not looking too heavy at this because I'm in college and every, things are there's a social aspect to my drinking. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm failing some classes, but it's not that big of a deal. And yeah, like I have all these bills that are piling up, but that's not that big of a deal. And yeah, like there's some issues in my relationship, but it's not that big of a deal. And I'm just a drinker. I saw myself as a drinker. That was part of my personality. And I'm at the tavern and I'm doing the trivia nights and that was it. And that's the thing about alcoholism is that it was really just waiting for the training wheels to come off. And I didn't appreciate that. Yeah, I'm drinking every day now. And yeah, it's getting earlier and earlier in the day, but um everything's cool until it's not cool. And the thing that wasn't cool was that that guy was my local bartender and I got engaged to my local bartender as one does. And then we broke up as one does. And that was the excuse I needed. That's not the reason that my drinking got worse. That was what I used as the reason to take off all social appearances of my drinking because my body was ready. I'd been training for this moment, okay? Now I didn't need the trivia nights and I didn't even need friends to be out drinking with me. I was just drinking as much as possible. Um, and it wasn't a choice. Every problematic part of my drinking that, wasn't a big deal before, now it was happening every day. So it was a huge deal, the drinking and driving every single day, the money issues astronomical. Um, I'm failing out of college. Actually, this is funny, and I didn't share this until I was a few years sober, but I graduated college, right? I graduated, I walked the stage, and I'd broken up with my fiance, who was the local bartender, and I was the server at that place, and so he kept the restaurant in the divorce. So I'm applying everywhere for my first big girl job. I get this entry level gig at this office. Um, and so I'm working at this office and they hire me because I'm graduating, right? I'm waiting for my degree to come in the mail. I failed my last class. I failed, I didn't actually technically graduate because I was drinking all the time. And so I never did get my degree. And so then I have this big secret so my job can't find out. And I'm in my office job. I'm drinking every single day. And I am a mess. I am thousands of dollars of debt. I got creditors calling me. I'm on the cusp of losing everything. My ex, the fiance, the guy, the man, we tortured each other for the last couple of years. Those are the worst years of my drinking. I'm drinking and driving every day. I'm driving into work drunk. Um, I would pass out. Now I have new bartenders, right? So I'm passing out at their house every night, driving into work drunk, wearing the same outfit that I've worn for the past couple of days. My boss at the time did not like me. I'm not a fan in the office. Um, and we just exist like that. That part of my story is really pretty boring, and I want to emphasize how boring it is. I got myself in some pretty funny situations at some points, like you pass out drunk in the Keys. That was kind of cool because it's the Keys. Um, I got there was a time I got, I'm dancing with some toothless cowboys up in the Gainesville area, Chiefland, and I get locked out of my car and it's 4 in the morning and I got this trucker who steals my sunglasses. I mean, like there was some stuff, but I want to make it very clear that I was a daily drinker and every single day I was a very sad, pathetic loser in a bar, just trying to blot out my existence. Desperately partying, desperately trying to find someone who could make me feel better about myself all the time. And That's really where it went. I mean, the terrible thing about drinking is that it you don't want to do anything differently. I have vivid memories of my mother calling me as I'm sitting at at this point I had a lot of regular bars until I couldn't be there anymore because I would do some horrible faux pas and then I'd have to find a new regular bar. And so this time it's Kahuna's, and I have these very vivid memories of my mother calling me, um, just so concerned about me. And I just, she annoyed me. I just ignore her phone calls. I would ignore my friends. They didn't drink the way that I drank. And it wasn't that I didn't love my family or I didn't love my friends. I just had no desire to be around them. In fact, I say this often. It's like the people around me fell into two categories because my life had become so superficial without me realizing it. Either you were a tool and I could use you, which meant that you gave me money, you gave me attention, you gave me company for the night, you gave me something. So you could stay, or you were a liability and you told me things about myself that I didn't want to hear. You held me accountable for my actions. You said uncomfortable truths and you had to go. And so if I couldn't use you, you had to go. And I didn't see it like that at the time, but that's how it was. Unless I was drinking, I wasn't interested. And so my life became very, very small and very, very lonely. And that brings us to March 17th of 2017, St. Patrick's Day. Yeah, so like I said, my job hated me. Rightfully so. I'd be out drinking until 5 in the morning and showing up to work late and drunk, and how I was still employed, I don't know, but I'm at the cusp of losing my job. I got all this debt. I'm drinking, driving all the time. My partner was cheating on me and standing me up, and I'm gross and all the stuff. And it's St. Patrick's Day, which was a Friday that year. So I finish up at the job that hates me, and I'm going to Kahuna's, and I'm drinking all night long, and I'm going back home with the bartenders, and then they're dropping me back off the next day, and so it's Saturday and I got a full day of drinking. Now, I'd done what I think we all know is a good alcoholic math. So I'd paid off enough. I had like -$2 in my debit account. Let's be so clear here. But I paid off enough like credit cards. So I had 70, I remember in my head, I had $70 to drink that day. And I'm working an office job. So I work Monday through Friday and I have $70. It's Saturday. I don't have to wake up tomorrow morning. That it wasn't the worst day of my drinking by far. The lies that I had out there, the people that I'd pissed off, the horrible things that I'd done, like this was nothing. My mom wasn't even like obviously mad at me at this point. My ex, like I said, we tortured each other, but he was talking to me at this point. So, which was so much better than when he was ignoring me. And I'm drinking. I'm drinking all day. I'm at Kahuna's. It's what I love to do at that point. If you're in the St. Petersburg area, it's on Gandy. It's still there. And it's now 11 o'clock at night on a Saturday. I'm very, very wasted. I remember I'm sitting at the bar and I have this, well, now what they call it in the rooms is this moment of clarity. And I know in that moment that I'm doing exactly what I want to be doing. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I'm at Kahuna's. I want to be at Kahuna's. And I'm not going to curse. I'm miserable. I'm absolutely miserable. Okay. It was one thing to be absolutely miserable when I started to sober up. Like I'd been pushing off horrible depression and anxiety for years. For years, when you start to come out of it, or you wake up, or the drunk starts to wear off, and you're like, that bubbling in your stomach, that oh my God feeling. It's just like, this is just too much. I just can't take it. Every single day is another to-do list. And I can't believe I did that last night. And how am I going to face this problem? Everything's just boiling over all of the time. I knew that feeling. Okay. When you were sobering up, I that made sense to me. Okay. That's when you chug 3 beers and 2 shots and you just keep going. Okay. And things are better. But now I'm wasted. I'm wasted as you could possibly be. And it's 11 o'clock on a Saturday night and I have enough money to drink and I don't have to wake up tomorrow morning. I don't have to go to the job that hates me with all the lies that I've told and all the bill collectors and all this stuff. But I'm sitting there and I'm doing exactly what I want to be doing, and I know that things are never ever going to get better. And that is a terrible place to be. Um, but it's where I needed to get. So I wish I could say that I was graceful at that point about my journey to AA, but the thing is that my drinking wasn't a problem to me. I did not see my drinking as a problem. I loved drinking. I loved being a drinker. I loved being in bars. I loved everything about it. That's who I was. That wasn't my problem. Living was my problem. The demands of everyday life was my problem. I never got to a place where I hated my drinking ever. Loved it till the very last day, which was that day, incidentally. Um, so no, I'm not going to quit drinking. That's not even on my radar. It's living that I can't stand anymore. I just can't do it anymore. And like I said, I knew things weren't going to get better. At that point, I think a lot of people see it as you got two options. You either up the ante or you get out of the game. And I decided I was going to get out of the game. But like I said, I didn't go to AA because I didn't have a drinking problem. I had a living problem. And so I went home and I tried to commit suicide and I failed. Um, so I was Baker acted by the St. Petersburg Police Department and sent to St. Anthony's Hospital. And I woke up the next morning just absolutely devastated to be alive. And then the cat was out of the bag. So you know, I I'm not really looking at my drinking in any kind of objective light here. It's the living that I can't stand. But it's curious to me now, not curious, it's just a stark reality. I would rather die than quit drinking. Because as soon as I like realize that I haven't done it and I'm still on this side of the earth, I'm like, okay, well, you got to get me out of here. Because if I'm still alive, then gosh darn it, I need a drink. You know what I mean? And now I got all these problems I still got to fix. I got all those bills and the job that hates me and the man that won't take my calls anymore and on and on and on. And what I love about the solution, and we said it earlier, is this is a common solution. These steps work for everybody. These steps will get you your own pathway to a higher power that will solve your problem. This is my story, right? So what I'm going to say here is that when I went home and I tried to commit suicide, I'm not religious. I was not very religious at that time. This was a CYA, okay? I went home and I wrote a very quick suicide note, which was a testament to how selfish I was. I actually found it when I was about a year sober. And in it, I asked God to forgive me for what I was about to do. Because I'd heard suicide was a sin. If I'm about to meet a maker, then I want to make sure that maker's good with me. You know what I mean? So I asked God to forgive me for what I was about to do. And of course, then it didn't happen. And all I can say to you is that things started changing at that point. I don't think they would have stayed changed. Okay. I think we got a moment. We got a moment where we saw things differently. And thank God that I was surrounded by people who could capitalize on that moment and get me to do the same, right? So, because I'm granted this moment and I'm in that hospital, and the doctor asks me, how much do you drink in a week? And now I lowballed it. But I still gave a pretty reasonable answer. I think I did something like in my head, I was like, okay, well, if you have like a minimum of 15 drinks a week and you times it by seven, so knock down five so that they don't totally freak out, but like just tell them something like 70 to 90, you know? And they were like, actually, this doctor was kind of cheeky with me, man. That he was like, well, no wonder you're depressed. A woman your age is supposed to have 3 to 5 drinks a week. And I'm so honest. I'm not seeing myself as an alcoholic. So I just thought that guy was a loser. Okay. I'm not being mean to the doctor, but it's kind of like when the dentist says you're supposed to floss every day. Don't come at me with the dental hygiene. Okay. Some meetings aren't cool with that. I don't floss every day. And I don't know anyone who does for that matter. But anyway, I just thought that that's something that doctors say. It's like no one actually drinks 3 to 5 drinks a week. Um, and so again, like he doesn't understand my problem. No one understands my problem. My mother, who'd been talking to me for years about my drinking, she didn't understand my problem. My exes, they didn't understand my problem. No one understands. Just get me out of this hospital, okay? Because now I got bills to pay. You know what I mean? And I was in the medical side of this hospital before they shipped me off to the psych ward where I would do my bake in Florida. It's called a Baker Act when the police put you in the put you there, make sure you don't kill yourself. So I'm in the medical side just so they could flush my system of what I did, and I get this phone call from this woman, and I now know my stepfather used to be a dean at a church, and there was an AA meeting in that church. And so he called the woman who ran that meeting and said, my daughter just tried to kill herself. She's an alcoholic. She needs your help. Please save her. And this woman just gets on the horn. She's like, that's not really how it works, but I'll give her a call. And so she gave me a call in the hospital. She's like, hey, I heard you might have a drinking problem. I think I could really help you out. Would you be willing to talk to me? And I said, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much. That's very thoughtful of you. I really appreciate it. I'm actually kind of tied up with this Baker Act. I have to do a psych ward stay, so I'm busy. I will call you maybe when I'm back in my apartment. Thank you so much." Just click. Um, and so that yeah, so then they ship me off to the psych ward. Um, what's funny about the psych ward is that you're not allowed to leave until they say you can leave. And so I don't really know what the game plan was there because she just came the next day. It's like, what am I going to do? They gave me like a green elopement bracelet, so they were sure that I wouldn't escape. So her name's Lori. She came to the psych ward, and there was nowhere for me to run. By this point, though, like I'd met with a social worker. The people had not the people, my parents, my parents had seen my apartment. They saw how I was living, which I'm just going to say it right now in case someone needs to hear it. I was a gross alcoholic. Not every alcoholic's a gross alcoholic. I had very much the double life, office job, come home. Squalor was the word that my stepfather used. I lived in squalor. So so people are really going catching fire, this word that she's an alcoholic. Oh, Rachel's an alcoholic. Oh, she needs to go to AA, all this stuff. So now it's my buzzword. I know I gotta get on board here in order to get out of the psych ward. So this is when Lori meets me. And it's what she did for me is described in the big book to a T. It's working with others. That's exactly what she did. She told me a little bit about herself. She asked me a little bit about me. And you know, just assume for the next month on in my story, I'm crying. Okay, I'm crying. That's just how it was. So I'm crying. I'm in the psych ward. I'm crying because I didn't much like the psych ward. And I remember asking her, "Does this mean I can never drink again?" And and she said, you can do whatever you want to do. Okay, but what do you want to do? And again, I got pretty close to telling the truth. This is the God stuff. This is the stuff that just was different than what I usually did, okay? Because I told her the truth again. I was like, I want to be happy. And that is the truth. Like I said, I did not see myself as a drinker. So sobriety for sobriety's sake meant nothing to me. Like don't just make me sober and give me this life, okay? Because drinking isn't my problem. I love drinking. It's living I can't do anymore. I can't stand this. And I just want to be happy. And she looked at me and she said, if you do what I do, you will never have to feel the way you are feeling ever again. She is still my sponsor and she has made good on that promise. So now we're over 8 years with that. Um, and if I don't say it later, then let me say this now. There has never been one thing I've done for Alcoholics Anonymous that I've ever regretted, ever. I cannot make that promise about anything else in my life. Alcoholics Anonymous has never let me down. And I've had to do some pretty scary stuff, okay? I had to make my amends, man. So anyway, so I'm getting now the psych ward. And as tearful as I am and as heartbreaking as all this stuff is, I'm not really buying that I'm an alcoholic, okay? Thank God that that woman, Lori, she cleared her schedule to come see me because she had a full day. She cleared her schedule to give me a solution that I did not want. And I remember that every time I'm talking to a newcomer, okay? She wasn't going to beat down my door, but she gave me the solution. And she's the reason I'm here today, why my life is saved and why I have a life worth living, which are two different things. But anyway, I didn't even think I was an alcoholic Again, this is God working in my life. I got a moment. I have a moment because I have Lori in my head promising me that if I do what she says, that I'll never have to feel this way ever again. She's telling me to go to a meeting. My mom doesn't trust me at my apartment, so she's driving me to this meeting when I get out of the psych ward, and she's staring daggers at me in from the car, okay? So I go to my first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. That's March 22nd, 2017. That's my sobriety date because that was the first day that I had a choice in the matter of staying sober. Psych ward, they don't let you have booze or cigarettes for that matter, which was heartbreaking. So I go to my first meeting and I sit down. You know what? Actually, what I how much time do I have? Do I have like 15 minutes left? That's good, right? Yeah. Yeah, we're good.
Yeah,
Okay.
you've got at least 15.
Okay, 15, cool. All right, yeah, I can just go on and on. So I'm at my first meeting and
20. You got 20.
I got 20 minutes? Okay, cool. So I'm at my first meeting and I sit down and I'm 10 minutes late because it was in this church and I had a lot of rooms and I couldn't find the room and I didn't want to be there anyway. So I'm 10 minutes late and I walk down and I sit. I want to drink. I want to drink so bad. I love drinking. I can't stand that I'm not drinking. And I walk into this room and I sit down and I'm in the middle of this woman's chair. And I say that because I didn't want to relate. I wanted to be different. Okay. I was 23 when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. All right. And I was a woman. And my first meeting was a woman's meeting actually. But from then on, there's a lot of men in meetings and a lot of people were older. And I was dying to be different enough to not have to be here. I was looking for it. But I sat down in that chair and I listened to the rest of her share. And I'm not going to curse at this meeting because you asked me not to, but I remember thinking, oh, F word. That's me. It's me. She did what I think a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous can relate to. She started putting into words things that I'd never been able to put into words about how I was feeling. Even the shameful stuff that I did about my drinking. The thing about me is I'll do something so horribly cringy and embarrassing, and then I will immediately forget it because it's not in my best interest to remember, okay? That's gonna really get in the way of my drinking. So I forget some of the worst things that I've done. And when people go to a meeting and they share that stuff, I learn who I am. I learn the severity of my problem so I don't die of alcoholism. This is terribly important. Thank God for the woman that was there that got me to immediately relate, despite my best efforts not to relate. So I sat through that whole meeting sobbing. Okay. I'm sobbing. I'm sobbing for this whole month. I've already said that. And they told me to go up at the end of the night and to get a chip. And that meant that I had a desire to not drink. Um, and that reprieve that I've been talking about lasted for a month. That's all I'm going to say. Just lasted for a month. I went to a meeting every single day. How I did it is a shock to me because I just remember thinking I want to drink so bad. And instead of going to Kahuna's, I went to a meeting. This woman who became my sponsor has always been lovely and nice. But here's the deal about Lori, okay, is that she's going to tell me the truth. Lori will tell you the truth. Lori's from Boston. She's going to tell you the truth. And that hurt my feelings back then. Okay. The truth was a weapon for me. If you didn't pick up what I was putting down, like I said, you were a liability. And so, but I called her every day, despite this, despite the fact that she told me things that I didn't want to hear. I called her every day. I went to a meeting every day. I started talking to people that I didn't want to talk to. I thought about going to meetings. I'm like, my name's Sarah. I'm an alcoholic. Like, I really wanted to be anonymous because I didn't want you to think that I was actually going to stay here. Um, and I just did that for a month. And thank God that I did because that would not have lasted. It would not have lasted. If maybe it was I was afraid they were going to put me back in the psych ward. Maybe I was just too tired to fight for that moment. I don't know what it is. I know that if you're in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, you can capitalize on it like I did. Because I did for a month and then I woke up. I picked up that 30-day chip and it's actually one of my most favorite chips uh, because I hadn't done anything real for 30 days in so long. And I knew I'd been sober for 30 days. I just knew it. I felt it. I've been flipping sober for 30 days. All right. And that lasted for about 2 minutes. And then I thought, oh my gosh, am I really going to stay in AA? Is this really what my life is at 23 years old? Is this what it's going to be? I'm going to go to a meeting every day and I'm going to call Lori and I'm going to start reading this book and this is what I'm going to do. And this was so important. Because for that month, I'd found a fellowship. I found my home group, St. Pete group, which was my home group at the time, and they proved to me that I was an alcoholic. Okay. That and what I said before, when I honestly want to, I can't stop drinking, or if when I drink, I can't control the amount I take. That was me. They convinced me that I was an alcoholic. And I want to like sidetrack here for a moment because I hear the word reservation used a lot in meetings. And I just want to point out how the big book uses it. Because when I heard it in meetings, people were saying, listen, you gotta be willing to stay sober if your mom dies, man. You gotta be willing to stay sober if your dog, which my dog did die actually at 90 days sober. You can't stay sober with that. But you got, just like if you lose your job and all this, you have to stay sober. And that is true. But at 1 month sober, I couldn't promise you I was going to stay sober through all of that. I absolutely had reservations. I had tons of reservations. I wasn't even sure I was going to be here a week from now, okay? And that's not how the big book uses reservations, especially around step one. What it says is, if we are planning to stop drinking, there must be no reservation of any kind, nor any lurking notion that someday we will be immune to alcohol. That's what I had. Okay. I absolutely had reservations about staying in Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay. I was not signed up for doing this for the rest of my life, but I knew because you told me that first month, I gave this a month. I believed you when you said I was an alcoholic and what that meant. I have a chronic, progressive, fatal illness. It's never going to get better. At best, it'll stay the same for a while before, of course, getting worse. That's the name of the game. And I don't have to like it. I don't have to stay in AA about it, but I didn't realize that I only had two options. Of course, I'm 23. I got all these options. I got all, I'm gonna find Prince Charming in a bar and everything's gonna change. I'm gonna get into a certain pay bracket and everything's gonna change. And that's just not true. Either I pick up the tools of this program or I drink until the end. Those are my two options. That's it. For the alcoholic of my type. If you're not an alcoholic of my type and you can do a more moderate method, then my hats are off to you. That's not my jam. Yeah, alcoholic for me and my friends, Alcoholics Anonymous is the last house on the block. And so I only got two options. And it was good to know that. Okay. I didn't realize what game I was playing. I'm so grateful that for that month where I was a zombie and I'm just in a meeting and I'm just crying, that you told me what it was to be an alcoholic because I didn't know. And so then I come out of this a month later and I believe with all my heart that I only have two options. So now that I know I only have two options, I'm still really thinking about going out and drinking. That's the case of the efforts. And this is where step two comes in. Okay. I know the gravity of my condition and I'm still thinking that maybe I should drink myself to death. Isn't that crazy? That's just that's what we got. That's what we got. And I remember I'll tell the story. Okay, so here's the deal. I'm going to this meeting and I picked my home group. I'll be so honest because there were some cute guys there. Okay, I'm 23. There were some cute guys. They came to the 10 p.m. So that's how I picked my first home group. And thankfully they were a great group for a lot of reasons. But I married one of those guys, so it did work out. But anyway, so I'm going later. I married him later. Not then. So I'm going to this group and I have this crush on this guy. So I wore this dress that would have killed at the bar. Okay. It was backless. You can't wear a bra with this thing and it slips all the way up, it slits all the way up to the side and it was completely inappropriate. So I wore it to this meeting and I thought it was going to give me the confidence that I had in the bar, just like that old feeling. I thought I was going to really rock it and I've never been so uncomfortable in my skin in my whole life. And I went and I told my sponsor about it and she got a real good kick out of that, which I didn't much like. Um, but I told her that I didn't know how to behave anymore. I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know what I believed in. I didn't know how to talk. I didn't know how to dress. I didn't know where my life was going. I didn't know how I was going to fix all of my problems. Like I said, I'm in terrible debt, okay? And I got this very toxic relationship that I can't seem to put down. And I've got horrible depression, obviously. I got all these things and that's what I'm saying. I'm at the point of the efforts. Meanwhile, I'm getting into there's a solution. I'm getting into step two. And I'm telling Lori, like, listen, I don't know if there's a higher power or not, but if there is a higher power, I find it very hard to believe that it's going to work personally in my life for these problems and my alcoholism. I find that very hard to believe. And I'm gonna shorten this down, but she wasn't this crass, but she basically said, Rachel, how arrogant are you? You don't know what God can do in your life because you haven't tried. And that's what prejudice is. And they use it all in We Agnostics, this word prejudice. Prejudice is a pre-existing belief not based in reason or experience. I don't have the experience. I've never worked the 12 steps as they're laid out in the big book. So I can't say that it's not going to work for me. There's good reason to believe that it will because I have an entire fellowship who has agreed on a common solution that these steps will fix my alcoholism. I was wildly prejudiced. So, she had a really good point. That's how I came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. And a quick note on that is this is my understanding. There's nothing in the big book that teaches me how to stay sober. I don't get smarter here. I get more, maybe more aware, but I definitely don't get smarter. What the big book does, and it says it in the big book, is it allows me to have a relationship with a higher power that relieves me of the obsession to drink, that solves my problem. My problem. I can't stop drinking. I'm drinking myself to death. So what the steps do is they show me how to have a relationship with a higher power. That's great. I didn't have a higher power of my own conception. If I did, it was very superficial. It was that CYA I told you about. But that's great because all I had to do was work the steps as honestly as I possibly could. And that's how I got my concept of a higher power. So just to say, I didn't have one before I came in. This wasn't carpet for the horse. When I took a third step, it was explained to me, which I did shortly after my second step, because again, there was good reason to go forward with this work. Okay. Like, honestly, sitting and thinking maybe it's better to die of alcoholism is insanity. Okay. To not try the solution would be crazy. So that's how I got to do a third step. And my sponsor explained to me, listen, you're making this decision to turn your will and your life over to the care of God. You don't know how to turn your life over to the care of God yet. That's what steps 4 through 12 are. So you're deciding to go forward with the rest of the steps. And when you are done, you will take another woman through. That was the deal. And I did it. And I'm doing it. Um, so that steps 1 through 3, and then like the rest of the steps. Okay, meanwhile, all of this time and throughout my sobriety, I already said it before, I have a home group, I have a service commitment at that home group, and I'm helping other women. The way my sponsorship line does it, I didn't sponsor other women until I'd made at least 3 of my amends. That's not how every group does it. The important thing is that you listen to your sponsor. Ha ha ha. Um, but that doesn't stop me from helping other women. Okay, I'm given rides. Like I said, I'm very involved in service at the home group level and at the district level. I am responsible for helping other people. Okay, it's desperately important for someone as self-centered as I am. Okay, as I'm doing that, I'm going forward with the steps. So I got a 4-step. It was thorough. Again, I think certain sponsorship lines do it differently. I did it out of the book. I got my resentments for people, institutions, and principles. And then I have a fear inventory, and then I have a sex inventory and a sex ideal. Um, what I know about the 4-step and why I continue to do a detailed, lower my hand, please, and why I continue to do a detailed 10th step is because when I'm doing inventory, if you look at resentment is when I have a terrible problem with something happening around me, like resent, the Latin base re-feel. If I think about a certain thing, it brings up certain strong feelings within me. When you threaten me in that way, extreme anger, sadness, remorse, regret, whatever the case may be, I'm very, very tempted to do what I want to do. Okay. I'm uncomfortable and I got to do what I got to do. If I'm doing what I got to do, I'm not doing what God would have me do. If I'm not doing what God would have me do, I'm sacrificing my relationship with God. Okay. So that's why I do a 4-step is to determine where in my life and where in my behaviors I separate myself from God. Because if I don't get that relationship with God, my obsession to drink will return. Okay, that's why I do this inventory. That's why certainly now it's very important that I see where I'm dishonest. Okay, it's like, hey, listen, I was here to put down the Yingling. What do you mean I got to look at my moral fiber? That's crazy. No, 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 no. It's not. It's not. And that's as I really was skeptical about all this, and that's okay. I was okay to be skeptical because it worked. So we just got to do it. And so I did it. I did a thorough 4-step. I was completely honest with my sponsor in the 5th step. There were certain things that I held on to until the 5th step. And I did it. I told her everything in the 5th step because I'd been to meetings where people said they hadn't and they drank again, which is what the book says too. The first reason, most important, why we share everything. If we don't, we're liable to drink again. I'd done so much work in Alcoholics Anonymous. Could you imagine like not sharing everything on your 5th step? That's crazy. It's like, oh my gosh, all this work for nothing. No, I don't think so. So I told her about the lie about my college degree, which I still hadn't gotten. I failed my class a few more times in my sobriety before I did get my bachelor's degree finally in sobriety. So I told the truth about that, and I told the truth about all my bad relationship behavior, and I told the truth about all my bad spending and all my lies. I told her everything. I told her everything, and I hated my fifth step. I was so depressed. I was so depressed that when I went home to do six and seven, I was entirely ready to have God remove all my defects of character. I knew that they didn't work, not one bit. Um, and I had a beautiful moment in step seven when I asked God to remove them for me. Um, and the important thing about step nine, step eight and nine is that I did it. There are certain, like I listen, I've had some great amends. I've had some great amends, but there are certain amends where I just had to do them and I hated them all the way. And when I think about them, I still cringe about them, you know? But that's the one where we talk so much about the four step. Oh, the four step. Oh, I can't stand the four step. The ninth step, you can sit on your ninth step amends for years. For years. In fact, recently I did one about 6 months ago. And I hadn't even realized that I owed these amends, but they were from like 2 years sober. And when I left this job, I resigned from this job and I said, hey, listen, I did this work and I only half did that work. I didn't fully do that work. So I left that for someone else to finish up. That's harmful. That's harmful. I wrote them a letter and I sent them a lot of money back. You know, I said, listen, I was dishonest about this. And I hate that. That's my profession. That was so embarrassing. I can't stand that I did it. I can't stand having to cop to it. And it just doesn't matter. Imagine doing all this work and not staying sober. It just doesn't matter. Um, so that's the most important thing about my ninth step. And I remember one time I was making this, this was an amends to my stepfather. And you know, I finished doing my spiel, which every single amends that I do, I go over with a sponsor first because I can see them incorrectly. And it's just so important to be humble in all of these things and do it the way that it's supposed to be done. So I'm okay getting eyes on these things. And I did my whole amends and I asked my stepfather, is there anything else? And he looked at me and he said, you know what, Rachel, you have done so many things that are distasteful. You are so much like your father. That's a jab, just so you know. I think we have fathers like that. That's a jab. He was like, you are so much like your father. How do you live with yourself? And I thought about it. And this is another God moment. I thought about it. And I said, I live with myself because I'm not that person anymore. I'm not that person anymore. That's when I realized the ninth step of men's had started to come true. Because I could live with all that stuff. I do. I regret a lot of the things I did to people. It was terrible. And now it is the fodder. It is the one thing that can help another alcoholic get sober. It just is. And that has been one of the I was talking about this with one of my friends the other day, this beautiful transformation that happens. I used to go to meetings to get what I needed to hear in order to stay sober one more day. Now, when you go to a meeting, what can I bring to it? How can I help someone else stay sober? That when you go to a meeting, that is 12-step work. And like I said, I already talked about how important it is to do a daily 10 step. I couple that with an 11 step. My relationship with God keeps the obsession to drink away. And it has been removed. Okay, listen. I did all this work. It's been years. I go to concerts. I'm around booze all the time. I don't have any urge whatsoever. In fact, I've since quit smoking. God is good, guys. God is great. And I found this God all by doing the steps, not the other way around. Um, to have this kind of freedom and to not try at every opportunity to give it back uh, would be an insult at best and something worse that I can't put into words. And yet Alcoholics Anonymous has made my life so good that I do find myself wanting to skip out on meetings, wanting to not take that phone call at 10 o'clock at night, wanting to not raise my hand. Does anyone need a sponsor? There's a lot of people that need sponsors here in Charlotte. And I think about that moment where Lori cleared her schedule and she visited me in the psych ward. And I'm going to tell you, as I finish this up, I've had a long year. I've had a long year. I spent time, the past few years in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm like, oh my God, Rachel, you are doing so great. You are doing so well. Everything is coming along. You've worked so hard for this. And that's true. And that's true. But it also turns out that things were going my way for a long time. Okay. I don't mean that badly. I mean, of course, before this, people were sick and people passed away and it was awful. But this past year, I've had health stuff. I've had job stuff. I had a miscarriage. I, of course, moving was terribly difficult. I mean, I've had some certain things happen. I won't even go into detail here, but it's been a really rough year. And when I think about that year and all the beautiful things and all the beautiful people that still surround me, I think about that amends I made about 6 months ago. And the one I really didn't want to do that makes me cringe and makes me like just want to vomit, even now, just thinking about it. And I think that's it. That's the difference. And I think about, like the hour, I have a sponsee that lives like an hour away from me now. I'm like, Rachel, why did you do this? And you just drive to the sponsee to do more step work. And I'm like, that's why. That's why this stuff didn't take you down this past year. That's why you can still laugh. That's why you have the most beautiful people in your life. And that is not of me. I haven't brought anything original to Alcoholics Anonymous. It's all been given. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be a part of your fellowship tonight. Thank you for everything. Thank you for my beautiful life.
Rachel, thank you so much. Let me just stop the recording.